Hello, welcome to another exciting day of math. We are going to be covering the order of operations and how to solve algebraic expressions today. The difference between equations and expressions is expressions don't have an equal sign. So basically it's not solving technically, it's just simplifying. If we look back at this comic that I put up here, order of operations, why is it important? If we look at the example of these kids up here, we have Jimmy, let's call him Jimmy, who's really frustrated with math and's got quite the crazy hair going on. He had 3 plus 4 times 2, and he got the answer of 14. We got Sally Sue over here, and she got same problem, but she got an answer of 11. Order of operations allows us to solve math problems around the world and get the same answer. They're the set of rules that is global. That means in China they do the same thing as they do in Japan, as they do the same thing in Germany, as they do in the US. So that's the important part of what we're learning today. All right, take out your notes. It's page 39. We're going to go through these, and these are a lot of example problems. So hang in there. If you need to pause the video, if I'm going too fast, make sure that you get all of the notes though, because this is important. Okay, so remember, this is a section where there is no calculator allowed unless I give you a calculator in class. If you get a calculator in class, then you can still use a calculator here. But if I don't give you a calculator in class, there is no calculator. That looks like all one word, no calculator. Okay, order of operations, and when we get in class, we're going to be watching some videos to help us remember what the order of operations are. But if you can see, I've got in really big letters, I've got the order of operations, a short acronym here to help us remember. P stands for parentheses. But this means all grouping. So I'm going to put a big G here for grouping, because sometimes I write it as GEMDAS to help you remember it's all grouping. That means parentheses, we have these little brackets, we have braces. It also means absolute value. Remember those absolute value sticks? Those are considered groupings. So those go along with parentheses in the groupings. All right, our second step is to solve all exponents and square roots. So that's exponents so remember, square roots are the opposite or the undoing of an exponent, or undoing of a square. So that's why we do square roots along with exponents. The next step is to multiply or divide, and it's important that you remember that we do this left to right. So make sure you highlight that or circle it so you don't forget. So that's multiply, multiply, or divide. And when I say or divide, sometimes it's and. Sometimes we have multiplication and division in the same problem, and that's where we solve left to right. So if you need to, write a big L to R so you don't forget. Whatever's on the left first is what we do first, just like you're reading a book. Then the last step is, of course, what we learned first in school, addition and subtraction. And again, those could be or, and it's always left to right. Same thing as multiplication and division. Highlight this down here or circle it, something to help you remember. All right, let's look at our first example. And as we are, let me have you write this little note down here at the bottom. As you're solving, I want you to identify each step that you're solving. You can say each step that you do by boxing it or underlining it or using a highlighter. Highlighting the step. That's going to help you know what you've used and me see what you've used. So as you're solving the problem, you know what hasn't been used so you can bring it down. Let me explain what I mean. All right, in this example, we don't use X's anymore in 7th grade. I apologize for putting that in the notes. It should be a dot, so go ahead and replace that in your notes. So it should have 3 dot 2 squared divided by, in parentheses, 6 minus 3. Okay, I like to, as I'm solving these, put PEMDAS, which is that acronym that we use, to help me remember what to do first. So first is parentheses, so I'm going to highlight that this is what I'm doing first, and I'm doing 6 minus 3. So my first step, I'm going to bring down everything that I didn't highlight, and I kind of get a little happy with my highlighter. 6 minus 3 is 3. I don't have to bring the parentheses down because I don't need them anymore. I got rid of everything inside of them, or you solved everything inside of them, so I can get rid of them. So now what am I going to do next? Bring out my highlighter. My next step is to do, because I did my parentheses, now I'm going to do my exponents. So my exponents right here, 2 squared, which means, remember, 2 squared equals 2 times 2, which is 4. And I'm going to bring down everything else that I didn't highlight. So now I've got 3 times 4 divided by 3. Remember, I've got multiplication and division, so I'm going to do it left to right. So I'm going to do 3 times 4 first. 3 times 4 is 12. Then I've got 12 divided by 3, so that's my next step. I'm going to highlight that. 12 divided by 3 is 12 groups, or 12 split into 3 groups, which is 4 in a group. And then I'm going to circle my final answer. And as you're solving, your problem's going to kind of look like a slice of pizza with a big pepperoni here at the end. That pepperoni helps us be able to zero in where your answer is, because these are a lot of steps, and a lot of times students do not circle their answer, and it makes it really hard for them to find it and for us to find it. All right, let me show you another example. This time I'm not going to highlight. Let me make my pen smaller so I can do this. All right, so for this one, I'm going to box in my answer so you can see what I'm doing. So you understand what I mean by box. So again, I'm going to write my acronym over here, PEMDAS, to help me remember what to do. My first step is my parentheses. I've got parentheses. Now notice I've got that little tiny exponent, but it's outside the parentheses. So I have to solve what's inside the parentheses first. So what is 4 minus 1? I've got 3, and then it means times when it's right next to a parenthesis like that. 4 minus 1 is 3. Don't forget your little tiny exponent, plus 22. Now, my parentheses are gone. I do have an exponent, so I'm going to box that. That's what I'm doing next. Bring down everything that's not in your box. And 3 squared means 3 times 3, which is 9. So I'm going to keep it in parentheses just so I know it's multiplication. So now I've done my exponent. I've got to do multiply or divide, and I have a multiplication problem here with -3 times 9. A negative times a positive, and I encourage you guys to use your tools. So this is how order of operations are different from last year. We're now throwing in integers, so you have to remember your integer rules in addition to the steps of order of operations. So let's go back to the problem. I have -3, so a negative times a positive 9. Here's my negative times a positive. My answer is going to be negative. 3 times 9 is 27, plus 22. I'm going to erase this so I have some room. You guys can use your... Okay, now I have a negative plus a positive. So the tool that we taught you to use is your battle boxes. So I'm going to draw my battle boxes so I can remember my rules, because I'm not quite really good on my adding and subtracting integers yet. That's a negative 27, so that goes in the negative box, and a positive 22, that goes in the positive box. If they're in different boxes, I'm going to subtract them, but first I need to look at them and say which one has more. I have a positive 22 and a negative 27. 27 is bigger than 22, so that's a negative answer. Subtract 27 minus 22. That gives me 5, so my answer is going to be negative 5. Sorry, I forgot to box that. And my pepperoni at the end. So those are your two examples. So I've shown you two ways that you can highlight your step, either using a highlighter like I did in example number 1, or you can use boxes like I did in example number 2. Some people like to box in different colors. If you like to use different colored pens, you can do your work in pencil and then box what you're doing in a different colored pen so it's very clear. One little note down here at the bottom of your notes, I wanted you to see this. One operation per step. Don't try to do multiple operations. And for full credit on tests and quizzes, each problem must be solved using only one operation per step. And I want you to highlight, box in, or underline to show what you're doing. Okay, let's do some more practice. We're not going to do all of these. Some of these you're going to do for your homework. Let's start by looking at number 1. Remember I said we're not using that x, so again I apologize. Make that x a multiplication dot, because that's how we write it in 7th grade. So looking at this, I'm going to write down PEMDAS so I don't forget what I got to do. So my first step, I do not have any parentheses. I do have an exponent, so now I'm going to box that exponent, and I'm not going to include the negative, and I'm going to explain why in class. But for now, just box the number with the exponent. Bring down everything that's not in a box. What is 2 cubed? That means 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So my answer here is 8. Now I've got a subtraction and a multiplication, so I'm going to do the multiplication, include that negative with the 8. So now I have 20, and what is negative 8 times a positive 2? If I use my tools that I've been given, I have a negative times a positive, which gives me a negative. That's negative, and 8 times 2 is 16. Now I have subtraction, so those are done. 20 minus 16 is simply 4. Circle your pepperoni. So that one wasn't too bad. That was a basic one. This might be something you would have seen back in 6th grade. So let's go on and show what they're going to be doing as we progress. These are going to get progressively harder. So don't freak out. Take them one step at a time. All right, let's start by writing our acronym, PEMDAS. All right, first step, do I have any parentheses? I do. But notice within your parentheses, you've got a multiplication and an exponent. You have to follow order of operations even within the parentheses. So for this one, we're going to have to do the exponent first. So what is 1 cubed? That means 1 times 1 times 1. Well, anything times 1 is itself. 1 times 1 is 1 times 1 is 1. So let's bring down everything we didn't use. Don't drop your parentheses yet. Okay, now I'm going to solve what's in my groups. I've got 2 sets of groups. I've got the parentheses around the 2 times 1, and I got the absolute value symbols. Remember, that's included grouping in the groupings. So let's work left to right. I'm going to do 2 times 1. So 6 divided by, and 2 times 1 is 2. Now that my parentheses have, everything inside my parentheses has been used, I can get rid of them. Bring down everything you didn't box. Now, I still have groupings. I've got these order of operations groups, so I'm going to solve that first, or not order of operations, sorry, absolute value group. So bring down everything you didn't use. 6 divided by 2 minus, and the absolute value of negative 2, remember absolute value is always positive, so it's going to be a positive 2. And I put that there because I wanted to be clear that that is a positive 2. Now, do I need that? No. I can just write it as 2 because the positive 2 is just written as 2. My last step, so I've done my parentheses, I've done my exponents. Now I need to multiply or divide. I'm going to divide first. 2 divided by 3 is, sorry, 2 divided by 2, 6 divided by 2, can't talk, is 3, minus 2, bring down the negative 2, and we're going to subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1, and that's my final answer. Okay. So let's look down at number 4, because number 4, again, is getting a little bit harder. Notice I'm going to let you guys do number 3 on your own for your homework for the Edmodo quiz, and I'll give you answer choices to choose from. But if you look at number 4 is more complicated. We've got nested groupings, which means groupings inside of groupings. We've got brackets or braces, and we've also got parentheses. So let's look and see what we need to do to solve these. Again, we're going to work inside out. So innermost groupings first. I'm going to use my highlighter this time. Okay, I'm going to solve this step first. So I've got 4 divided by, 1 with my brackets, 5 minus, what is 3 minus 2? 1. Include your other bracket. I can get rid of the parentheses because I don't need it anymore because I've solved everything inside. And now I've got everything written that I didn't solve. Our next step is the next set of brackets, which is this 5 minus 1. Bring down everything that's not highlighted. So I have 4 divided by 1, bracket 5 minus 1 is 4. And I didn't get rid of my brackets this time because, again, this means multiplication when I have a 1 right next to a grouping symbol, and I didn't want you to get confused. Now, could I get rid of that? Get rid of the grouping symbol? If I do get rid of the grouping symbol, you can't just write 14. You have to write 1 times 4. So if you want to do that, that's fine, but you need to understand that's what you're doing. But just for clarification, I'm going to leave my brackets here. In my next step, I've done my parentheses. I don't have any exponents. So now I'm going to multiply or divide. Remember, left to right. So I'm going to do 4 divided by 1. Oops, I guess I was highlighting, wasn't I? So 4 divided by 1 first, because that's on the left. I know we would want to keep working in the middle where we were working, but we don't want to do that. 4 divided by 1, anything over 1 is just itself. And we're going to multiply that times 4 and then divide by 2. So my next step, I'm still on multiplication and division. I got lots more to do. We're going to multiply 4 times 4, and that is 16. Then we're going to divide that by 2. My final step is 16 divided by 2. 16 divided by 2 is 8. So those are more the type of questions you're going to see as an 8th grader. Now, these are very complicated and you need to take them one step at a time. Don't try to rush through them. Don't try to do them quickly and in your head and not writing down every step. Because they're so complicated, I want to make sure you're getting them right. All right, we're going to skip number 5. I'm going to let you do that for homework. We're going to look at number 6. That's the last one that I'm going to look at with you, and then we're going to move on to the next section. Looking at this one's very different. I have a fraction with multiple steps. So when we're doing this, we are going to actually end up splitting that fraction. and I'm going to take the top down here and solve the top first. What is 10 plus 8? That's 18. And then I'm going to take the bottom, change my color. So now I've got my bottom color, and I'm going to solve the bottom down here. And I'm doing this for clarification. You don't have to do it this way, but it helps to show all your work so you're not making mistakes. I have 2 times 3, which is 6. Now I have to put them back into the problem, and I'm going to show my work over here. 10 plus 8, or the top number, was 18. The bottom number was 6. And I'm going to write everything that I didn't do. So I basically took the first step and did it separately, and then the bottom, or the numerator, and did it first, then the denominator. Now I have to come back and do order of operations. Okay, I have no parentheses. I have no exponents. I have to multiply or divide. My first is division right here with 18 divided by 6. Don't forget, that means 18 divided by 6. That is 3 minus 2 plus 5. Then I'm going to move on to my left to right. I'm going to do subtraction before addition because that comes first. 3 minus 2 is 1 plus 5. Then I'm going to add 1 plus 5, and that gives me an answer of 6. So with those double-decker problems is how I like to refer to them. Solve the top deck, solve the bottom deck, and then divide is your last step. Okay, I'm going to let you do 7 and 8 on your own for your homework for the Edmodo quiz. All right, turn to page 41. We're going to go over these words because you're going to see some of this, and we're going to come back and hit this again when we do our translating and solving equations later on in Unit 2. But for now, let's just refresh our memory. If we see the word difference, what does that mean? Think about that. What is that? What operation are we being told to do? Difference means to subtract. If I talk about more than is usually referring to add, or it could be referred to as subtraction, but most of the time it's addition. So I'm going to have you put a little star by it because it could be both. And I'm going to have you write it over here under flip words, and I'm going to explain why in just a minute. Okay. Quotient. Quotient is that funny word, and it means division. Quotient. Decreased, if something is decreased, then it is subtracted. Product is the fancy word for a multiplication problem. We've talked about that before. Less than, if I have less than you, then I'm going to subtract to find the answer. But that's another one of those that's really funny, and you have to read the problem. And we're going to write it over here in the flip words as well. Fewer. Fewer means subtraction. If I have fewer than you, I'm going to subtract to find out how much more, or more or less. Sum is a fancy word for the addition problem. Squared goes under multiplication because that means a little tiny 2, remember? And then from is another fancy word that triggers us to subtract, and I'm going to have you write that under flip words. And what I mean by flip words is this tells you to change the order of the numbers in the sentence that's given to you. And let me explain what I mean by that. So put a little circle or something around that so you know that's what that means. Okay. So let's look at some examples. Again, we're not going to do all of these. We're just going to do a few, and then you'll do the rest for your Edmodo quiz. So, for example, the difference of 17 and 3. If you look at the top of your paper, we know that difference means to subtract, and the two numbers that are given to me are 17 and 3. There's no flip words given to me, so I know I just write 17 and 3 in the same order they're given to me, and I write the subtraction in the middle. That's an expression. I have numbers with an operation, but I do not have an equal sign, so that's an expression. Looking at number 2, I see the words more than, and that than is my trigger word. I want you to draw this arrow over the top that tells you to change the order of the numbers. And if you look at the number words, we have 11 and we have 6. So if you think about what this is saying, 11 more than 6. Or let me put our names in there. Jeremiah had 11 more than Mrs. Inquist. If Mrs. Inquist had 6, then we know to add those. So all we're doing is doing 6 plus 11. So see how I took 6, even though that was given to me last, I put it first, and 11, even though it was given to me first, I wrote last. So I'm just changing the order of the numbers and the way they were given to me. All right, we're going to go ahead and do number 5 down here. 100 decreased by 25. Decreased means to subtract. We know 100 is given to us first and 25 is given to us last. So we're going to do 100 decreased by 25. That one was pretty easy. If we look at, let's look at number 9. Number 9 says 17, that's my number, subtracted from 30. You know, 30 is a number. Subtracted obviously means to subtract. What if we're looking at this from 30? So if I'm taking something from that, that has to come first. So from is that key word that tells us it's a flip word, tells us to flip the order. Because I can't take 30 from, it doesn't say take 30 from 17, it takes 17 from 30. So I got to start with 30 to take 17 from 30. So that's why that one is a tricky one. There is another tricky one on there, so I want you to, or a couple of them, I want you to go ahead and do these, and I'll have those on your Edmodo quiz. All right, our next and last thing that we're going to cover is how to solve order of operations problems when we're given a value that we're substituting in. This is called substitution, or it's called solving expressions, algebraic expressions. It's pretty easy. It's just order of operations with a little step in the beginning. So if we look at our example, evaluate if m equals -2. That means that every place that I see an m, that is now a -2. So we are going to take, all right, with pink, we're going to rewrite our problem. I'm just rewriting what I see, not the m's, just what I see. Every place I see an m, I'm going to put parentheses because that's no longer m. I now know that m is equal to -2, which means I'm going to replace that m with a -2. So that's why we put the parentheses there to put the -2 inside. That's all I did. I took m out of there and replaced it with a -2. Now we have to use order of operations to solve. Let me make my pen a little bit smaller so I can get this all in. I have multiple operations, so let's start with these. We do have parentheses, but they're not technically groupings because it just is showing multiplication. So I'm going to start with my numerator up here because I'm working left to right because I don't have any exponents. and I really don't have any groupings. I do have parentheses, but they're just being used to hold our -2 place where we put things in. All right, what is 7 times -2? That's going to be negative. Oh, helps if I use a pen. Okay, I'm going to have -14 there because a negative or positive times a negative, if you remember your tic-tac-toe board, is a negative. We're going to divide that by 4 minus 2. Remember, I'm just bringing everything down that I didn't use. Okay, now I have to, again, do multiplication or division, left to right. So what's given to me first? I have this division here, and it gets kind of sticky. I know you guys can't use a calculator, so let's think about how many times is 4 going to go into 14? 4 goes into 14 3 times with 2 left over. Add your decimal point and bring down your 0. 4 goes into 25 times, so my answer here is -3.5. Don't forget your negative sign. With order of operations, you're also going to have decimals and you're going to have fractions, so you have to be able to work with those. Now bring down everything that you didn't use. And I'm going to move this up here so that I can fit it all. Now if I look at what I'm doing next, I have a -3.5 minus 2. Not doing addition yet. I'm looking for multiplication and division. Make sure it's all gone. This right here is multiplication. I have a -2 times a -2. So rewrite -3.5 because I haven't used that. A negative times a negative is a positive. 2 times 2 is 4. And then I'm subtracting 3. Now I just have addition and subtraction, so it's easy. I work left to right. I have -3.5 plus 4. That's like having $4 and I'm taking, or I have a -3.5, which is the same as subtraction. If I have $4 and I spend $3.50, how much am I going to have left? Just 50 cents. If I subtract. So I have 0.5, and then I'm going to take away another 3. Oh, I did something wrong on my note key. Okay. Now I have 50 cents and I'm taking or I'm spending another $3. If you need to, use your battle boxes. I have a positive 0.5 and a -3. Which one's bigger? Obviously my negative, so my answer is going to be negative. If I have $3 and I take away 50 cents, how much am I going to have left? $2.50. So it's a -$2.50 or 2.5 or 2 5/10. So that's your answer there. All right, so let's look at some examples. And again, we're not going to solve all of them. We're just going to jump in and solve a couple. The first one's fairly easy. I'll let you guys solve that one. Looking at number 2. Number 2 is a little bit more intense. And some of these numbers get pretty big, but I'm not going to have you solve all of them. We'll solve some of them in school. All right, so again, this is what we're replacing. X is now 3. So let's replace. I have -2 times 81 divided by, and I have X here, so I'm going to put my little brackets and replace that X with a 3. And you have to keep your other original brackets. You can't lose those. And then I'm replacing this X also with 3. Now we have to look at order of operations. My PEMDAS, what am I doing first? I have parentheses, but I also have exponents. So I remember I have to work order of operations within those parentheses. So I'm going to do 3 to the 4th, which means 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Well, an easy way to remember this is 3 times 3 is 9. This 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 9 is 81. So I'm going to replace this with 81. I'm going to write everything that I didn't use. I don't need those parentheses because there's nothing with that 3, so I can just take them away. Next, I have to solve what's in the parentheses. What is 81 divided by 81? Just 1, not 0. And then I'm going to have 2. Remember, that means multiplication if you have a number right next to a parenthesis. Negative 2 times 1 is our next step because we're going to do multiplication before we do addition. Negative 2 times 1, a negative times a positive. Do your tic-tac-toe board, is a negative 2 plus 3. We're going to do the negative 2 plus 3. Do your battle boxes. Negative 2's here, positive, so my answer will be a positive 1. Okay, so those are an example of how you're plugging those in. Go ahead and try to solve 1, 3, and 7. 1, 3, and 7. I want you to solve number 1, number 3, and number 7. I don't want you to try to solve any of the other ones because the numbers get too big, and I don't want you getting stressed out about trying to remember all of those positives and negatives while you're doing your homework. I will put the Edmodo quiz up shortly, and when you come into class, we'll be watching some fun PEMDAS videos or order of operations videos and doing some fun actions to help you remember those steps. Remember, take your time, box each step or highlight it, use colorful pens to help you know what you're doing, and we will continue practicing when we come into the next class. Don't forget to study for your integer quiz.